The first time I saw this house was probably about March of 2005. I was thinking it was the perfect house to raise a family in. It had 4 bedrooms. It had a yard. But what sold me the most was the kitchen. The kitchen was so nice and spacious.
After spending years saving up to buy a home, by 2005, Delicia Scott, had saved up enough money to buy a modest 2-story English tutor for about $63,000. After losing her job in the Great Recession, she fell behind on her property taxes, and her home was foreclosed on by the county and sold at auction for about $4,600. But here's the thing, Delicia Scott never should have lost her home. And the reason is, the city of Detroit for years was overvaluing her property so that she paid thousands of dollars more in taxes than what she owed. And it's not just Delicia, and it's not just Detroit. This is a pattern that we're seeing all over the country, county by county, city by city, where Black homeowners, their properties being overvalued and thus overtaxed. And in the most extreme cases, many of those people end up losing their homes.
I know I'm not the only person in the city of Detroit that's living in a house that they used to own that they're still renting because they just don't want to leave their house, or they don't want to miss the opportunity of purchasing their house back. I feel it's a travesty.
The property tax is the largest source of local revenue for cities, counties, school districts. It raises more than $500 billion a year across the country, paying for, public safety, sanitation, schools, all of the basic services that local governments provide. It's the foundation of our local systems.
So the property tax is actually a pretty complicated tax because unlike, say, a sales tax or an income tax, where we have data for each individual sale or each individual person's income, and with respect to the property tax, only maybe 2 or 3% of homes will sell in a year. And that means for the vast majority of homes, there's no real-time indication of their value. And that's the job of the assessor, is to figure out the value for all the homes, including the many that didn't sell. And the way that's done is by looking at the homes that have sold, trying to build a statistical model that relates the price of those homes to their features and characteristics, and applying it to all the homes in order to get prices for the homes that haven't sold.
And essentially what they do is they take the prices of these properties and figure out, well, how much per square foot, how much per bathroom, and they have some other variables like location and other things they do, but it's all sort of observable characteristics of the homes from the outside. The problem comes up with what assessors cannot see. Some people may have redone their kitchen or upgraded their bathroom. Other people may have a leaky roof or a porch that's falling down, or a missing window. These are characteristics of the house that assessors cannot see. And what research has shown is that it adds variability at the lower end of the price scale, and so makes those homes particularly difficult to value. And so if the valuations, if that is skewed in some way, then you're gonna have the same kind of issues with the bills themselves. It's sort of, garbage in, garbage out.
The biggest problem that I've been focused on is this issue that we call regressivity. And this is the phenomenon that homes that have a low price tend to be assessed at a higher level relative to their true price than our homes that sell at high prices, which is just to say, low-priced homes tend to have an assessment level of usually over 100% of their value. In other words, they're being assessed at more than what they're actually worth, whereas high-priced homes are often assessed at less than what they're actually worth. And what that means is that low-valued homes are paying more than they should in taxes, and high-valued homes are paying less than they should in taxes, because the assessment is the basis for determining the tax.
And what that means is, because Black people own the lowest valued homes disproportionately, and because the lowest valued homes are overtaxed, this problem of regressivity actually becomes a structural or institutional racism problem because it's disproportionately impacting Black people and disproportionately helping white people, contributing to the racial wealth gap. It's a very important piece of the systemic racism puzzle. And just to give you a kind of a measurement of how bad this can be, in Chicago alone, there has been a study that showed in just 5 years, $2.2 billion in property taxes, and the burden of property taxes, was shifted from the highest valued homes to the lowest.
I first saw this in Chicago, and anyone from Chicago will tell you, I mean, Chicago's just kind of a special place. My first reaction was, well, this is, one of those only in Chicago sort of things. It really only began to dawn on me after that Chicago work began to get attention. I started hearing from people in other places. And ultimately that led me to want to know, are there just some peculiar places where this is a problem, or is this really fundamental? And the more data I got and the more places I looked, the more I could see that this is just baked in deeply to the property tax. And it is very pervasive. It's not only in Chicago, it's not only in Detroit, it's virtually everywhere that I've looked.
A recent study by the University of Chicago looked at 2,600 counties across the United States and found this pattern was pervasive. More than 9 out of 10 of these jurisdictions have this regressivity problem. And there's no place where this tragedy isn't playing out more than in Detroit. 1 in 4 properties in Detroit have been foreclosed on because they fell behind on their taxes.
For the person that owns this house, it's a tool to make money. I want to take you on a journey of what it's like for me when I have to pay my rent every month. If I drop it off myself, I drive it here. I know it got here, so no one can say, well, we didn't get your payment or whatever. For me, it's where I raised my kids at. This is the stability that I was able to give them that I didn't really have as a child. So here's the process. So you see there's no drop box outside, no mail slot in the doorway. So what I usually do, this nice little welcome mat, usually slide it from the side, make sure it goes further enough into the building so nobody has the opportunity to try to fish it out. So when I had kids, I wanted to make it my mission that they didn't have to have those experiences. I didn't want them to have to worry about where we have to lay our head or is it going to be safe for us. That is my meal, and I feel like that may be further enough. Somebody try to fish it out, they don't have to work for it. I want to leave my children something. They've seen their mother work all their lives. Yeah, I got insurance policies, but that's not nothing like having a home. I want to leave them something that I worked hard for, that I earned and I put my blood, sweat, and tears into. Hopefully it's safe and it gets where it needs to go. I don't want the threat of somebody can come in and displace me. Even if I pay my rent on time, somebody can come in and say like, you know what, thanks, but no thanks.
In America, owning property is if not one of the most significant drivers of wealth. I mean, they don't call it the American dream for nothing, and part of the American dream is owning a home. It doesn't just benefit your current economic situation, it really has an impact over generations. The way the rubber meets the road here is that families that are trying to accumulate and build wealth with property, which is how you build wealth in America, are being overtaxed because the homes that they buy are on the lower end of the price scale. Some would argue that they also suffer from lack of services. Police, schools aren't as good, all of these other things. And so it's not just a matter of how much in taxes people pay, but what they're paying for, it sort of skews the entire system in a way that's just deeply unfair. This pattern of unfairness, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a long history in the US of racial segregation, redlining, whereby black families were kept out of the highest valued neighborhoods.
In my view, this is a textbook example of institutional racism because, institutional racism, I think of that as a system in which the outcomes are disproportionately unfavorable to a minority group, even though no actor in the system may necessarily be motivated by racial animus. And I'm certainly not claiming that assessors are individually racist. That's not the takeaway at all, but rather the system produces racially disparate outcomes, even though, or even if, no individual person involved in it intends it to be that way. This falls in a category of hardships that I think are in the everyday experience of African Americans that aren't always recognized until they are documented with data because the people in power would not like to recognize them. The truth is, even with that sort of evidence, the system is not quick to respond either.
I'm familiar with Professor Berry and his colleagues, and I have a fundamental disagreement with that statement. We have reviewed every single sale in the city, over 65,000 over a 24-month period.
So, there seems to be a pattern among local officials when these issues are pointed out to them. So, for example, in Chicago, the assessors attacked Professor Berry personally. They attacked me personally. When Chris did similar studies in Detroit, the same thing happened. They said, he's a right-wing provocateur who doesn't want high taxes. They said he can't value the property from Chicago, that it's not all about spreadsheets, that somehow these very statistically driven processes are an art form and not, based on numbers.
A very smart person once told me this. It's an art, not a science. You have the facts, but you also have to understand the market. Detroit is a unique market, and you can't get those nuances simply from a sales study. You have to live here, and you have to understand what's going on here to understand valuation.
The real tragedy in cases like Delicia's is that there are other people who are benefiting off this system. In Detroit, for example, Delicia's home was one of thousands that was put up for auction in 2014. And so that sort of flooded the market with very, foreclosed homes, which are very cheap, that investors, come in and scoop up and then rent back to people or just hold as assets on their balance sheet. In addition to that, the county government for Detroit, Wayne County, takes these delinquent taxes and is able to roll them up into bonds. So it's sort of, I call it a perpetual money machine, where some people, wealth is destroyed, and there's others who the wealth is created. To fix this problem is going to require a lot more resources, and assessment offices just don't have that. So it's better to stick your head in the ground and try to act like there's nothing there. Of course, you can't fix the problem if you don't admit that you have a problem.
I think the hardest question here is, how do you fix the system? Or at least, how do you improve it? My thinking is that the system can be improved, but I'm not sure it can be completely fixed. And the reason I say that is because this problem of those unobservable features of homes, those things that buyers and sellers get to see, but the assessor doesn't get to see, that's a pretty fundamental problem. The assessor can improve things by using better statistical models, by getting better data, but I think there's just fundamentally an upper bound towards how fair the system can be. And so we should really be asking ourselves is, how much unfairness are we willing to tolerate as a society?
It's hard to get more personal than someone's home. And so these taxes on people's homes, it touches everyone's life. It seems like this arcane, sort of boring corner of municipal finance, but in fact, it's really how people live their lives and how people gain wealth and provide for their families.
I'm not on a lease, so now, it's scary because, again, they could come in and say, you gotta leave. So the roof has been leaking. There's mold in the basement. We just live around it because at the end of the day, this is my home. even though somebody profits for it, even though this home is going to give somebody else's children financial wealth, and my kids are not going to benefit for my hard labor, my hard work, and the money that we put into it, it's still my home at the end of the day.